Welcome to Figuring It Out as We Go, reopening the church in a post-pandemic world from a local pastor's perspective, where our goal is to hear from different pastors in different contexts and considering their thoughts as we consider regathering the Lord's people for Sunday worship. This is a podcast ministry of Life Point Church in Woodland, California. Now, here is your host, Pastor Cody Cannon.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Figuring It Out as We Go, reopening the church in a post-pandemic world from a local pastor's perspective. I have a super special guest with me today. Pastor Thomas Terry is the lead pastor of Trinity Church in Portland, Oregon. He's also the founder of Humble Beast, a record label and creative ministry in Portland, as well as a spoken word artist and a member of the group Beautiful Eulogy. He also co-authored a book called Images and Idols, a book on theology and creativity and beauty that is just super helpful for the church and speaking into a space that really needs to be spoken into for the local church in particular. Thomas, thank you so much for being with me, brother. It is super good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. Thank you for having me.
You know it. All right, man. Well, just tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about your church, Trinity, and how everything's going up there.
Yeah, well, we're in the kind of center of Portland, Oregon, and we just opened up our church about 2 weeks ago, albeit we're following the COVID guidelines for our county to the letter, but that's been really good. Prior to 2 weeks ago, we had just been, pushing out pre-produced content to our congregants who are watching at home. And so things are going really well. These last couple of weeks have been awesome to see our people and just kind of see them worshiping together. It's been really cool.
Right on. Yeah, but that pre-produced stuff was beautifully pre-produced stuff, a very Humble Beast looking stuff for Trinity up there. I watched some of those, man, and I was like, yeah, this is why we don't pre-record anything. This is too good. It's intimidating.
We have some really creative people in our church that really flourish at making things look beautiful. So
that's awesome, man. Well, how are you doing? Navigating through all of this. We're a number of months into a pandemic. You were a brand new lead pastor when entered into all of this stuff. How are you doing, man? How are you holding up?
I'm doing well. It's both stretching and good and challenging and frustrating. But I'm doing really well. Despite the circumstances, things are great. I have received a lot of encouragement from our members. Just seeing people over the last 2 weeks has really just invigorated me. It's made me feel, just kind of made me feel amped up a bit, because for the longest time it's just been really sad. Preaching to a video camera. I mean, it's not unlike anybody else's situation, but the fact that I was able to preach to our people that I care deeply about was great. So I'm doing a lot better. We still have a lot of challenges, and it's been tricky to navigate all these challenges. We make one decision, there's a reaction, both negative and positive, and that's just kind of the world that we're in. But overall, I'm encouraged. My family's encouraged. I have some good pastors here that serve with me that are very good at encouraging me and helping me to feel grounded and helping with the workload. So I'm doing really well.
Praise God, man. That's awesome. So you've alluded to it a little bit, but what is your church doing now currently? Been able to meet in person, gather in person for a couple of weeks now, but following and complying with the COVID stuff. What are you guys doing?
Yeah. Well, our county, which is Multnomah County, they have these restrictions that only allow for us to gather with 50 people in a building while practicing social distancing, while maintaining a mask. Everyone must wear a mask. And so that was a fairly new thing for us about a month and a half ago, where we were able to open up a bit. Prior to that, we couldn't do anything.
Right.
And so what we decided to do is kind of investigate what were all of the technical requirements. And then we ended up parsing out our building, which we have an upstairs where the sanctuary is. And then we also have a kind of downstairs area, which we had already been in process of making it more of like a big living room for, Bible studies, and, moms could come and do Bible studies during the week and their kids can play. So it was a big open space that we had been renovating.
It looks super cool. I've been there. It looks good.
Thank you. So we ended up kind of separating our building into kind of functionally 2 stories. And so the upstairs, we have 50 people who are here. The chairs are separated. Families can sit together, but they're separated by 6 feet from other families. And then they use the upstairs restroom. And then downstairs is cut off. You can't cross between the 2 because it has to function as if it's its own building.
Right.
And what we ended up doing is installing 2 kind of big screen TVs there. We just kind of threw an Apple TV on one of them. And what we stream upstairs live gets sent downstairs. And so downstairs is a smaller capacity, just given the size of that room. So we're about at 30 people there. And so, every Sunday now we have about 80 people. And that's been just amazing. It's been amazing. To tell you the truth, prior to that, it was pretty depressing. And, we were trying to do our best to keep people excited, keep people engaged. And it just was really, really tricky. And then this week, for the first time, we'll be doing 2 services. So in total, we'll be able to have 160 people
Praise God.
Attend church. And that is amazing. It's amazing. And we decided to move to 2 services because, our first Sunday, we limited the capacity. And so we first sent out invites to probably 50 of our existing members. But our congregation, we have members and we have a big kind of group of regular attenders.
Right.
And then since COVID has hit Portland, there's been a lot of people who've moved to Portland, and they were just kind of waiting to attend a service. They've been kind of plugging in with us online. And so we kind of parsed out a small group for members, a small group for regular attenders, and then a small group for these first-time visitors who've been waiting. And so when we went through our roster, we sent invites from A to D, last names, A to D. And then we just realized, man, it's going to be about 5 weeks before every one of our members can actually gather together. And just the elders were just like, man, we can't do that. We have to figure out a better system to get more people in and feeling connected. And so we're starting with 2 services, and we're seeing how that works. And we'll just kind of continue to stack if necessary, if there's a need. Of course, we have a lot of people in our congregation that have made it clear. We kind of polled our congregation a bit just to kind of see where everybody was at. If we were to open up a church, would you feel comfortable coming in? When would you feel comfortable? And so a good portion of our congregation, probably 30 to 40% in this kind of survey, said that they probably won't be attending for a long time. And so, so we assume that probably every other week members who want to come will be able to attend that 2 weeks. So.
Right, man. Quite. We've had to adapt and become pretty sophisticated, huh? The registration is something early on that felt so awkward to me. It felt so weird to me, like limiting who can come to church. What a weird concept. Unfortunately, it's something that I feel like I've gotten kind of used to, but it's pretty uncomfortable. But
the whole world of registration, because I come from like a performance and concert background. And we try really hard to keep that thing kind of out of the church, and to have people register and get tickets and stuff it just seems so, I don't know, it takes the family dynamic out of the gathering together. but it is just kind of, at this point, it's necessary. And the kind of elders of Trinity are just kind of like, whatever we have to do, if we have to just continue to be creative and be uncomfortable, we'll do it for the sake of the people. And so,
that's awesome, man. Praise God. So let me get into a couple Portland specific questions for you. And I think there's a lot of people kind of interested in hearing how it's going up there, man, being in your guys' shoes. I mean, California is, weird too. So it's like, it's all over the place. But how is the specific political, social climate in Portland affected churches attempting to regather and reopen in Portland? How's that going?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the political climate, I would say, is not too different from every other place in America right now.
Okay.
It's completely polarized. The only difference is you have a lot of kind of social activism in Portland. And so that has created, I think, both problems with our city, but it's also had some significant implications for the church. I mean, if you're acquainted with media or anything, you probably have heard that Portland's name has been dropped almost every night in the media. And that's because there's been protests and riots every single night. I think it's now like 120 something days of every night consistent protests and sometimes riots. And that's tricky because there are a lot of people who are in support of protest. There is a lot of people that are very anti-protest, and that has bled its way into the church. One of the things that's been really, really amazing about Trinity Church is that the diversity of the people in Trinity Church, and I mean the diversity in all aspects, but one of the things that's been really interesting is the political diversity in our church. We have a lot of people who are Republicans. We have a lot of people who are Democrats. We have a lot of people who are libertarians. You have just kind of people all over the map. And historically, it's been beautiful to see how people can unite around the gospel and kind of put aside their political preferences, their political allegiances for the sake of the unity of the church. But given the polarization in these days, it's become increasingly difficult for people to do that. It's almost impossible, I think, for people in our church to not be vocal about where they stand politically. And that has created a lot of tension in the church. It's created a lot of hurt, a lot of baggage. And in some cases, the diversity that was once prized and we really heralded, like you used to know, like, man, we are here because of the gospel, not because we are, politically homogenized or whatever. Now it's become something that's been probably one of the most challenging things to navigate within the church. We're constantly praying for unity. We're trying our best to address the political polarization of our city. We're fighting the influence of our city, which is so strong. It's so strong. And you're fighting media, which is so strong and so biased. I mean, so basically what you see here in Portland is both chaos. It's crazy, for some people, but, it's not as crazy as some of the media paints it to be. So, I mean, depending on what news outlet you're in tune with, you might feel like this is like a full-on war zone. And all of Portland is under siege, and that's just not the case. For the most part, there there is violence, there is protest, there is crazy stuff going on, but most of it is relegated to certain pockets and certain parts of Portland.
Yeah.
And those parts move around the city, but it's not like the whole city's under siege. So the media paints a pretty broad brush over Portland.
And that's like par for the course when it comes to like this whole year. It's like everybody's been able to like kind of view one angle, and that's the definitive angle for them. And it's like, you know, and you view from this side to this side, and that's all you see. Like nuance is just thrown out the window, non-existent in 2020. And I think Portland's probably like a really, really good example of that, of like, man, you look from one angle and it is chaos, and it is, you know, so is it chaos up there? The answer is like yes and no, right? Like it is with these areas, but then overall, you know, it's still Portland, and I think that's a good analogy for the whole year. Like if you look at one specific thing or from one specific angle, you see what you're going to see, but there's more to it. And so how has that affected or impacted like opening church? Like, does it just feel, do you feel the weight of it in trying to like regather because all of that is going on out there in the neighborhoods and things like that? Do you feel it in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. There's how I feel personally.
Yeah.
And that varies, you know?
Yeah.
But as we think about the church, we're nested in the heart of Portland. We're in the epicenter of the city. And for us, we just have a commitment as the pastors of this church. We have a commitment to be a light in the city. Mm-hmm. And so we are committed to just kind of following the guidelines as best as we can.
Right.
As best as we can. And so until we start to see that they're being intentional about isolating the church and making this like a Christian only situation. If they start opening up movie theaters and stuff like that and still lock down the church, that's a whole different situation.
Right.
But for the most part, we want to maintain a witness in the community because we care about these people in this city, especially in this neighborhood. And so, that comes with challenges. John MacArthur, I value his boldness, and when he took a stand, there was something inside of me that was like, yeah,
yeah, totally, yeah.
But then, when you think about John MacArthur, you just think about endless resources, and you think about a ministry that is not so much a local ministry, but a worldwide ministry. Mm-hmm. And so for him, there's very little, very little loss to make those types of decisions. And really they have the resources to hire all kinds of lawyers to help them and all of that stuff. And that's just a sphere. That's just a thing we don't even want to be we don't want to get involved with.
Well, and you just think of like, if your commitment is to Portland, how is LA County viewing John MacArthur's actions and, sitting in the middle of that. And so that kind of leads me to a question. How has been the Christian witness in Portland through all of this? Portland's a place, that is pretty, you've described it before as a little bit hostile to the gospel, that like winning a good name.
Little.
Yeah. So winning a good name for Christ in Portland is a challenging thing already. So how have churches responded? How has the Christian witness for Christ been during the pandemic and all of this?
Well, one of the things I would say is that most of the time churches have a pretty poor perception from the people of Portland.
Yeah.
The people of Portland, they just don't really like church. I mean, for the most part, it's post-Christian pagan culture, you know, in Portland. And so the last thing they want to do is, you know, step into a church. And it's so kind of, you know, Christian morality is something that is constantly, you know, under attack in Portland. And so if there's a time when they're not like dogging the church, then we view that as great. And I don't want to present it as, you know, we're just like this kind of seeker sensitive church and we are, you know, doing all these things so that we can, you know, be accepted in that we just come to terms that we're never going to be accepted. Because we herald the banner of Jesus. And so we're not going to be accepted in the city. But if there's not a lot of opposition towards us, then we consider that, you know, chill. And at this point, I don't think that the churches are really under attack by the city, because I think that the most of the churches in the Portland kind of proper area have kind of locked arms together and say, hey, man, we're going to kind of all together abide by the restrictions that the county has put in place for the sake of our gospel witness. So that if they're going to get upset with us, if they're going to be frustrated with the church, with these gospel churches, it's going to be because of the exclusive message of Jesus Christ, not because we want to push our constitutional rights or, you know, we just want to gather, and we desperately want to gather together. But we're gonna weather the restrictions for the sake of maintaining a good Christian witness, a witness that says, hey, we love our neighbors. And if our neighbors are scared about this COVID, you know, this pandemic, well, then we don't want to put kerosene on their fears. We want to help them when this whole thing, you know, rolls over. We want them to see our church and say, man, they loved this neighborhood. They bypassed their rights and their privileges and their preferences for us. Let's connect with them. And that's what our hope is, that we would be a light to these people.
And that's super beautiful that all like the churches could come together and for the sake of unity, lock arms and say, hey, we're going to keep doing
the gospel. Most churches.
Okay,
At least the ones, some are just doing their own thing, but most of those are outside of the, you know, kind of Portland kind of epicenter, you know?
Right. No, gotcha. Which I just think it is just a beautiful thing. Specifically though, and kind of circling back like a little bit, so with protests, with riots, with the stuff that's going on there, that's mainly been, at least from my understanding, the Black Lives Matter kind of movement, the racial justice movement, those types of things. And then, you know, as far as the media presents it, which I'm hoping you can help me with a little bit, you have also Trump supporters that have kind of rolled in as well, and almost like in a semi-civil war, at least from the pictures that I can see. Can you shine some light on that and just like at least like, I don't know, what you've seen, what you've experienced, at least being near ground zero?
It's tricky. It's tricky. I would say that protest and most of the riots have been connected to the BLM movement, and that's been pretty consistent and pretty regular. And then there are these pockets of, you know, kind of Trump supporters that feel like, hey, we're underrepresented in our state, and so we want to express our opinions. If you can have the BLM movement or even like Antifa consistently stating their views and heralding their, you know, ideology, well, we want to make our presence known, and that's just it's a disaster. It's a disaster when they do collide. And here's the thing, it's not altogether different than what we see on Facebook. You know,
Whoa.
you just have, it's the same kind of concept of extreme polarizing, where you have one particular group that has very particular ideology. You have another group that has another particular ideology, and there's no civil discourse. There's just no civility.
Yeah.
There's no talking. It's just a yelling match. It's just shouting matches going on back and forth. And in some cases, it becomes a violent fight. And that thankfully is not normative. That kind of conflict of two different worlds happening in Portland. I mean, it's happening, but it's not every night that's happening.
Right.
And the city, I think that the media tends to put the spotlight on that when it does happen and blow it out of proportion and make it this big, conflict that looks like there's just kind of civil war breaking out here. And that's just it's another way to fuel fear and anxiety and push your political ideology, because that's when people respond, is when they're afraid. I think the one thing that I consistently see happening here with all of these groups that protest and want to make their presence known, is that all of these people are longing for for hope. All of them are longing for things to be made new or right. And so you have people just exposing their worldview or their ideologies and saying, hey, we want change to occur. And I think we as Christians, especially in Portland, can look at that and just be like, man, you guys are just crazy. You're destroying everything. Or we can say, they're longing for something that only Christ himself can provide. And so we can see this as an opportunity to help them find hope, to find all the things that they're looking for in this broken world. They're looking for the brokenness to be made right.
Amen.
Well, there's only one way to resolve that, and that's through Jesus. And so I try to maintain that perspective while doing ministry in the city. It's really hard to do that. I find myself,
I can't imagine,
of the war, like frustrated, like when I drive down the street and like coffee shops that I love are just completely destroyed, when the beautiful art in this city that once existed is just it's just ugly and distasteful and graffitied, and political messages have destroyed the art of the city. And I just look at that and I get depressed, and the natural tendency in me is to just get frustrated with these people. And I always have to pray and ask the Lord to center me and help me to love these people, because they're lost, longing for hope that they'll never find in policy or in protest. They're just not going to find it.
Yeah.
They're going to find it in Jesus. And so that's why we maintain this idea. Let us do everything that we can to continue to be a light in the city, so that when they realize they're not going to find what they're looking for in protest and in policy, or in deconstructing everything, if they find themselves in a church still looking and still searching, we hope that they'll be acquainted with the God who can restore this world, who will renovate this world and make all things new.
Yeah, and that's so good, man. And I'm one of the things you said that I really appreciated that I haven't really thought about is that it is when the protests become riots and when there's conflicting sides and stuff like that, it really is like a real life portrayal of what is littered throughout social media. Like, it's just a spotlight on it really actually happening. People are saying awful, evil things and taking sides, really like overtly taking sides during all of this, but they're just doing it at a keyboard instead of on the streets of Portland. And so, like, which one's better? Which one, And so I think
there's a direct relation. There's a direct relation to what's happening in the streets here, because I think what's happened during the pandemic is everybody's social intake was turned up like 400%.
Yeah.
And the same, the boldness that happens on social media where people just, there's no nuance, there's no conversations, everything's typed in all caps.
Yeah.
It's just yelling matches. Then you get into the street, and it's there's the inability to shift from the virtual world to the material world. And so there is no like crossing over. Well, now I have to be cordial. Now I have to have a conversation. It's just materializing what exists on social networks.
And that's gnarly to think about, dude. Is like like a riot is really just like a real life DM, that like got sent out and was super angry, and that's just actually what it is, man. That's a really interesting thing to think about. Is we're seeing it.
I mean, even cancel culture is like unfollow.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%, dude.
Yeah. I'm going to purge my Facebook friends. So if you're seeing this, then you made the cut.
That's so beautiful. That's like so humane, dude. Like so
Ephesians 4.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, well, yeah, it's so good, dude. Well, thank you very much. And man, the last thing that like I'll ask you, and I just feel like so much of this has been so helpful to think about and consider. But as you kind of weather the storm up there and your unique contextual storm that you're in there, trying to reopen church, if you could give pastors any piece of advice who are trying and attempting to regather their people and reopen their church, what piece of advice would you give to them right now, if just off the top of your head?
Man, well, I would say two things. One is, as hard as you can, fight against your own personal cynicism towards the situation. Fight against your own personal, even political perspective of what's going on. Fight against the idea that you're failing as a pastor because people are leaving your church and people are just frustrated and all those things. I think you have to fight against that. You have to fight against that and find satisfaction in God calling you to this particular ministry in this particular season. Find your satisfaction in Him and being faithful to Him only. That's going to be one of the things that's going to keep you motivated when everything around you seems so dark and depressing. And then one other thing I would say, just on a practical tip, and I've really just begun doing this, and this has been really helpful, is making 3 to 4 phone calls a day to congregants.
Whoa.
Hey, I just wanted to call to see how you're doing. Love you, miss you. Can I be praying for you? I mean, you could look at the task of trying to connect with all of your members, and for some that just seems really daunting because we just don't even have the time to connect with all of them individually. But if you just do 1 or 2 a day, 3 or 4, just connect with them. What you'll find is that they love you. They love you. They're struggling with you. They want to be with you. And for the most part, many of them are supportive of your leadership. Most of them believe that God has entrusted their pastors to care for their souls. And so they want to love and care for their pastors through the process. Without talking to them individually, we kind of we have made up in our mind that they're frustrated with us. They're upset. Yeah. And we fall into that same trap of, just kind of what the media does to us. They paint pictures that are not really accurate. Yeah. And when you connect with 1 or 2, 3 or 4 members a day, it starts to reinvigorate you. You start to feel like, this is family. This is family. And they love me and I love them. And so that's been encouraging for me. And I would encourage pastors to do that very thing.
Oh, that's so good, brother. Thank you. That's a good, really, really good word. And so, thank you so much for being here with me. I appreciate it. Keep fighting the good fight up there. And I hope our paths cross sooner than later, bro.
Yes, brother. Good seeing you.
Thank you.